welcome to Community View. I'm Melissa Anderson. You know, in the next few weeks, voters will decide on 3 St. George City candidates from a list of 6. We've decided to ask them all the same questions for a brief overview of their standings. And with me today is candidate and incumbent Jimmie Hughes. Welcome, Jimmie.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You are not new to St. George. Tell us about your background and a little bit about why you have been on the council and why you qualify to be on it again.
Perfect. Well, I was born and raised right here in St. George. When I was born here, we were a town of about 12,000 people. So we've changed a lot since then. Like many other young people in St. George, once I grew up, I moved away to try to find my fortune. I like to tell people I went to California to try to find women, whiskey, and gold. Found none of them there. I got back to Utah where I met my wife and up in Salt Lake, and we eventually were able to move back here to St. George where we've raised our 5 children. My early career was spent in the banking business. Then I decided to do something I wanted to do versus something to make money, and that's when I got into the mortuary business. So I'm the owner and operator of Hughes Mortuary. So I'm what you call either a funeral director or a mortician, or in the olden days an undertaker. I have a secondary job / hobby, what my wife calls it, where I have a cattle ranch out on the Arizona Strip, and I do some of that with my brothers. So we like to say that that's a second job, but it's more of a hobby for us. But it's something that's in my blood, and I enjoy doing. So I like to get out and get dirty at the ranch.
And so what qualifies you to be city councilman?
So, you know, as city council candidates, we all like to try to differentiate ourselves and say, you'll hear things like we love St. George. You'll hear things, you know, what makes us unique. But I like to say I'm just like you or pretty much everybody else in St. George. I'm a business owner. I have to deal with city regulations, state regulations, federal regulations. I have children in the area schools. I have to pay taxes here like everyone else. So really I'm a citizen that's got a little bit of wide variety of experience over the spectrum, and I'm just like everybody else. Okay. And this is where I love to live, where I grew up, and this is where I want to live. What
do you feel is the most important issue going forward in St. George and even today?
Well, we're either 1, 2, or 3, depending on who you ask in an area of growth for metropolitan areas in the United States. So that has to be our number 1 issue. People want to live here. We obviously have a beautiful climate, beautiful scenery, but there's a lot of other places that have that. There's one other thing that we have here that I think draws people here, and that's the people. But growth, that's our biggest issue, and the things that go along with that. Infrastructure, water, transportation, all of those things are going to be affected by our rapid growth.
So let me ask you this, what's your stance then on tax increases for roads and infrastructure and support the future growth?
Well, nobody likes to pay any more taxes than they have to. I don't think anybody wants to come in here and say we want to raise taxes. Our policy in St. George has always been that new development usually pays for itself. We try to make sure that happens. When major infrastructure projects need to go in prior to development, we have to step in and do that. And we hope to be able to do that without raising taxes. And when new development comes in, they should be putting in the infrastructure so we don't have to do that. Now, obviously there's some things that can't be paid for that way. We're having a crisis in, all across the country really, but even in Utah with our roads and the road infrastructure and the tax system. Usually if we look at it really hard, it's not necessarily taxes need to increase, it's how we collect them and really how we spend them is what we got to really look at. Really, it's more of an allocation problem, not we need more problem. And
very briefly, we're running out of time, okay. But what's your stance on the construction of the Northern Corridor and Lake Powell Pipeline?
I support them. Is that brief enough? Two things really quickly. The Northern Corridor goes through the Red Desert Reserve. I understand the beauty of that and how dear it is to some people's hearts. I think we need to realize that was in the works for a long time, even before the reserve. The Lake Powell Pipeline, we need to look forward into the future. That water is accessible to us. We need to explore how we can get that. Not a blank check, but let's find out how we can maybe access that water. It's the responsible thing to do, I think. for our
Okay.
community.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's all the time we have. And don't forget to get out there and vote on Election Day. Have a great day.